Over the next 30 years, the global population is set to expand. This will put a huge strain on mineral resources we extract from the ground, especially cobalt, nickel, copper, and manganese, all minerals needed for a transition to clean energy. But what's above the ground is not sufficient. So today we're talking about mining in a new frontier here on StansberryInvestor.com. And we're getting to the bottom of it, the ocean bottom, in fact, with the metals company, which is scouring the Pacific Ocean floor for these minerals found in nodules. The nodules grow by absorbing minerals from the sea level. That is my explanation at the most simplistic level. But here to help us out with more information is the CEO, Gerard Barron, who joins me today, and Frank Giustra, who is a familiar face and friend to our show. Obviously, you know him as a great mining financier and philanthropist involved in multiple gold and silver companies above ground, but now he's getting involved in the ocean. So we're going to get his thoughts on it. He is a strategic advisor on the project. So gentlemen, welcome both to this very special episode here on Stansberry Investor.
Thanks, Daniela. Great to be back.
Great to be here.
So Gerard, I hope my explanation was not too simplistic, but basically these minerals that are critical for our cell phones, supercomputers, electrical vehicles are found in nodules as a gift from Mother Nature almost, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Daniela, it's remarkable. And this is what they're like. They're like golf balls just laid on the ocean floor. And it just so happens that they contain all the metals we need to power the green transition. And it's literally, people have described them as an EV battery in a rock. And so at a time when we're going through this, growth in demand for metals, to have a supply of them that can be produced at a much lower impact environmentally and socially compared to land-based is a wonderful thing for society.
Now, this is a huge operation that's involved in scouring the ocean floor. So I want to know the story, right, of how you started this, Gerard, and how you connected with Frank Giustra, who's a legend in the mining world in Canada, and how you convinced Frank to get involved in this.
Well, it dates back more than a decade ago when we started the company. And originally I was a financial backer because I've spent my entire life from university days building companies. And I've been lucky enough to build some great ones. And I've always been an active investor. And I was fascinated to know that the oceans were filled with metals. And so it was obvious for me to invest in this idea. And then as I became more and more aware that the existential crisis that climate change represented, I started to realize that, well, fossil fuels are bad, we know that, but are metals any better? And if we're going to increase production of them or extraction of them exponentially, then what's that going to do for the environment? So I really started to dig in there. And then I realized that actually, while we had an amazing opportunity, we needed to change the way we were approaching the problem, because we had to go about earning the social license to do this. And so in 2017, I made some changes. I mixed the board up. I stepped in as the chairman and CEO. And I met Frank at his house. I was in Los Angeles at the time, and someone said, "Hey, you should meet Frank Giustra." And I said, "Well, I've heard all about Frank." And they said, "Well, he's got a charity gathering at his house. You should go and donate some money and talk to him." And I said, "I'm on the next plane." And so I did. And I kind of had Frank at hello, Ocean Metals. And he was like, "I've studied this for 10 years. What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, in that case, it should be a short conversation." And we met the next day in his office, and we plotted a path where he would get involved and help me develop this amazing company to where it is today.
Wow. So Frank, let me get your perspective on it, because like I said, you've made a name for yourself above ground with, multiple successful ventures. What fascinated you towards the ocean floor and towards what you're now calling, this will be the greatest revolutionary thing to ever happen to mining?
Well, when I met Gerard 4 years ago, I had spent the previous 10 years trying to secure some licenses near the Cook Islands. Same stuff. It was nodules. And we spent literally years learning how these nodules worked and trying to get it. That never worked out, but through that process, I had to learn a lot about these seabed nodules. And so when Gerard walked into my house 4 years ago, I was very familiar with what it was he was talking about. And I did say to my partners back then, this can possibly be the biggest mining deal we've ever done, ever, but it's going to take a lot of de-risking, and we're going to have to keep it private for quite a while. And Gerard has done exactly that. He spent we've raised, previous to this last raise that he did on the pipe, we'd already spent $160 million advancing this project, de-risking it. And the reason it was so important to me was because, 8 years ago, I bought a Tesla. And I will never, ever go back to a combustion engine. It just doesn't make any sense on so many levels, most importantly, the environment. And, my kids praise me for it. And I think it's something, the world has to electrify. This planet depends on electrifying. It is an existential threat, climate change. And if you don't believe that, I think, I think that that's something that we all have to come to terms with. So when I saw this, I thought, this is going to be fantastic, but it's got some risk attached, and we did de-risk it.
So that's what I want to help, if you could help educate me at least a bit on this, because we want to mine above ground. You buy the plot of land. Okay, it's now mine. I get to mine it. Okay. But the ocean, right, from what the research I've been doing, is regulated by some, obscure branch belonging to the United Nations. Or, how do you stake a claim on the ocean floor, claim it belonging to the company? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, firstly, we're operating in what's known as high seas, and the high seas are regulated by the International Seabed Authority. And that was all agreed back in 1982 by something called UNCLOS, stands for the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. And basically it says, as a sovereign, you own everything within 12 miles of your coast. You have an economic right to everything within 200 miles, but beyond that, it's not yours. It's going to be governed by by the International Seabed Authority, and it's going to be deemed the common heritage of mankind. And so basically, the ISA is made up of 167 member states plus the European Union. And if you're a member of the ISA or sponsored by a member, then you can apply for anywhere in international waters. But there's no point applying where there is nothing. I mean, these nodules were first discovered back in the 1870s. And so there's one area of focus in all of the 360 million square kilometers of ocean. There's only one little area of focus, and it's about 1,000 miles off the coast of Mexico. So we applied for our first piece of area and were granted it in 2011, and then our second in 2012, and then 2015. And so we hold the license with the International Seabed Authority, and then we have a sponsorship agreement with our developing nation. And for them, it's great because it provides royalties for them once we're in production. We also provide job opportunities, education opportunities, and it really allows the developing nation to participate in this important asset that can go towards helping solve one of the biggest threats to the oceans, and that is climate change, global warming. And so it's got a very nice angle.
When you say it's a specific area, can these nodules only grow in or be born in certain parts of an ocean, types of water? Does it depend, or can it be anywhere?
Well, no, you need a certain amount of pressure. You need a certain amount of depth. And then the nodules that are so precious are off the coast of Mexico. And if you look to the right, you have the Rockies and the Andes. And many millions of years ago, through volcanogenic explosion and erosion, all of the metal tops ended up in the Pacific Ocean, and they settled in this one area. So these nodules are also found in the North Sea, but they're not worth picking up because they have no nickel and no copper. And, lucky I met Frank, because the nodules in the Cooks don't have as much nickel or copper either. And so this is the area of interest. And so we're busy getting ready to start extracting them.
Well, we'll get to the phase you're in a bit, but I just want to understand or give some context to our viewers of how much mineral do you think is lying underneath?
Well, firstly, they lie on the ocean floor. So one of the great things is, if this were a land-based deposit, we'd be drilling thousands of holes trying to imagine what the shape of this ore body was. But we don't have to do that. We get to take pictures and to survey it with sonar and other survey techniques. And so we now have around 178,000 square kilometers of bathymetric survey data of our license areas. And that means we have really fine resolution. And so we know that on our 2 licenses that we've defined the resource. We're a Canadian company, so we're compliant with the 43101 standard. We have 1.6 billion tons of these nodules on 2 of our blocks. And that's enough to build around 280 million mid-sized EV batteries. So it's really big.
Yeah.
But there's more there as well. So this is a big resource.
And you know, we know what the all-in sustaining costs are when you're extracting, you know, gold or silver from a mine, Frank. But you know, what kind of expenses? I mean, it looks like a huge undertaking what's involved. So you know, can you give us a glimpse of, you know, the costs surrounding this type of undertaking?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, almost 50% of the revenue comes from the nickel contained in here. So we think of it as a nickel deposit. And because of the very high grade, we are able to operate in the bottom quartile of the cost curve. So that's the best way to understand it. And in fact, if you want to put it all into nickel equivalent, our resource is around 3.2% nickel equivalent. So it's really high grade. So many of the technical challenges of extracting these nodules were solved about 50 years ago, because before UNCLOS was agreed, there was a lot of activity in this area. There were 4 different consortia. Lockheed Martin were involved, Shell, BP, Mitsubishi, because this is where they were going to get their future metals from. And they'd finished their trials. They'd solved the technical issues. Kennecott, now part of Rio Tinto, had built the onshore refining plant. And then they wanted to move into commercial production. So they thought, who do we ask? And so they went to the United Nations, and it was the United Nations that stopped them. They said, hang on, we haven't agreed who owns the oceans yet. And so they had to all stop. But the good news is 50 years ago, they solved these technical challenges. And obviously, with the development of the offshore oil and gas industry and cable laying and pipe laying, the technology has advanced significantly. And I guess from our perspective, that takes away one of the big risks. And so the economics are very attractive because of the very high grade. And, you know, I was visiting a platinum mine in South Africa a couple of years ago. And, you know, as we were going down the shaft, you know, they'd been building it for 5 years. They still had another 2 years to go. I mean, we go out, we sail on out there, we drop our shaft in 24 hours. It's called a riser pipe. And so ocean resources come with a lot of advantages over land-based as well. And the not needing a lot of fixed infrastructure is one of those advantages.
And you will go into production in 2024, is that correct?
That's the goal, yes.
That's the goal. You know, Frank, I know you're, you know, you consider yourself an environmentalist, a proud environmentalist. You just started Million Gardens movement. You're a lover of nature, and you know, often we hear the feedback that mining is not a, you know, and rightfully so, is not a clean industry. I mean, obviously, it's made great strides. So one of the aspects that often comes up is, you know, will the ocean floor be disrupted with deep sea mining?
Yeah, well, you know, and obviously Gerard can go into a lot more detail if you like, but we have literally spent tens of millions of dollars on just the environmental studies here. We both feel it's really important that we do this right, you know, with minimal disturbance to the environment. There's very little life at the bottom of the ocean at 4,000 meters. Very little life, but there is life, and you have to be cognizant of it. And you have to respect it. And we've decided at the outset of this, that we were going to do this right and spend a lot of money to make sure there's as little criticism as possible. There's always going to be a disturbance of the environment, but we feel when you put this side by side With terrestrial mining, there's not even a comparison. You don't have toxic waste dumps.
Right.
You don't have deforestation. You don't have child labor issues. All the stuff that you kind of find in places like DRC or Indonesia, we don't have those problems. These nodules are almost pure metal, with the exception of the silica content, which is sand, pure metal. So we harvest these things and then just process them. And I honestly think that we cannot afford not to harvest these metals. They've been sitting patiently on the ocean floor for 500 million years, just waiting to be harvested, just like ripe fruit. and really, and it's sake of oversimplifying it, the concept is very simple. And it is, I will simplify, but think of a very sophisticated, high-tech Hoover at the bottom of the ocean, just sucking up these rocks off the sand. That's what it is. And obviously, it's a lot more complex than that, but that's the process with very little disturbance to the surrounding environment.
So Frank, for you, do you is this the next frontier? Do you think we're going to, you're obviously the first doing this, but do you think we'll see more and more companies starting to look at developing the ocean floors?
Well, we own, the license we own are obviously privately owned, the metals company. Most of the other licenses are owned by governments. Okay, and so China, I guess Korea, Japan, numerous other countries own the license areas. We're, I think, the only, maybe there are two, maybe there's another private company, but I think we're the only private company that has these licenses. And these metals are going to be, you cannot electrify the world at the rate that is being talked about without accessing these metals. It's impossible. Every electric vehicle has around 85 kilograms of copper and about 56 kilograms of nickel and 7 kilograms of cobalt and 7 kilograms of manganese. That's all the metals that are in these nodules. You need them. That nickel supply is not readily available on land. So what we think we've got here, and I hate exaggerating, using hyperbole, but Elon Musk started the electric vehicle revolution. We're starting the battery metals revolution. This is what we're doing. And I think it is going to be the future of mining with respect to battery metals.
And Gerard, the company recently announced its plans to go public with a $2.9 billion SPAC, trading under ticker symbol SOAC. Eventually it will be TMC. So tell us about it.
Yeah, yes, we announced on March 4 the amalgamation with SOAC, and yeah, it's an exciting development for us because it means we also raise around $570 million, and that provides us enough capital to get into first production. And I think investors were always worried about, will you get enough money to be able to get production started? And this capital raise gives us sufficient capital to make first production. So it's a very important milestone for us. And we're also excited about the public stage that being a public company will present, because this is a really important story and it's hard to be heard as a private company. And so it's the right time. It wouldn't have been the right time before now, because we've made so much progress. We have so much visibility with regards to our onshore, our offshore, our environmental work program. And of course, people believe more about the green transition, the uptake of EVs now than they ever did. And so it appears that, we've got the timing pretty okay on this one. I'm really excited about building a category around low impact ocean metals, because I think we're moving into a period where people are starting to care about the provenance of the materials that go to make these batteries. It's like, where did it come from? What was the impact? And, if you look at where nickel growth is forecast to come from, it's Indonesia. But unfortunately, the nickel there is in the form of nickel laterites, and they're our carbon sinks. They're rainforests. And so we're destroying these carbon sinks. We're generating horrible tailings and horrible waste streams. And when there's a much more efficient way, and we can compress those impacts just on a CO2 level by more than 90% when you build an EV battery cathode with our metals compared to land-based. And I think that's gonna count in the future, and people are gonna want to know these numbers.
It's just incredible stuff. So thank you so much for educating me and all the viewers today, Gerard, and best of luck with this venture. Frank, nothing surprises me anymore from you. You know, the fact that you're involved in this, you're always like thinking the next level, the next thing. So
yes, well, you know, it is important. So, you know, I really believe what I'm saying. I mean, I like I said, I own a Tesla. I will never go back. I think everybody should go out and buy an electric vehicle and invest in the metals company. I think this is the future of our planet is at stake, and you know, and we're going to also do very well by it. So that's important too.
Well, best of luck with it, and keep us posted. Thank you so much. Thank you both.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
And thank you for watching this very special edition of StansberryInvestor.com. Remember to share us where you watch us. In the meantime, keep staying tuned. We have a lot more great content for you. Thanks for watching. I'm Daniela Cambone.